Hey friends, so here we go with our topics for today. We're going to talk about fiction and nonfiction, okay? So let's start with, let's start with fiction, okay? Fiction means false. It's not a true story, okay? It could be completely made up, parts of it could be made up, or it could have different things. So whenever we think about fiction, this is what we're going to look for whenever we're reading, okay? The first thing is a plot. So fiction stories always have a story or a plot, okay? So that means something happens, there is a problem. Usually it comes to like a big problem, and then there's a solution, and everybody ends, maybe not happily, but the story will end. And that's the plot, okay? It has a setting, so a place where the story happens. It has characters usually, okay? So if you think about the story, The Trial of Cardigan Jones, that's a fiction story. It's not true, it's made up. And in the plot, Cardigan sniffed a pie, the pie went missing, he went on trial, there was all this drama, and then the judge helped them see that it wasn't really Cardigan's fault, so the problem was resolved, okay? The setting was in the courtroom and outside. The characters were Cardigan, the judge, the lady, I can't remember her name, okay? And then the theme. So theme is a message, and we're actually going to talk about that a couple days from now. I think we'll talk about theme on Friday, but most fiction stories have a message, okay? So the message or the theme that was in Cardigan Jones would be, don't always judge somebody just because you don't know them. They thought since Cardigan was a newcomer, no one knew him, they were like, oh, he totally stole that pie. Okay, so those are the things that we look for anytime that we're reading a fiction story, a made-up story. The plot, the setting, the characters, and the theme, which is the message. So there are different types of fiction stories. If it says it's science fiction, realistic fiction, historical fiction, fairy tales, myths, mystery, horror, if you like scary stuff, folk tales, and fantasy. So we've actually read quite a few of those genres this year in our reading stories. Can you think of any stories that you've read in those genres? Okay, so the opposite of fiction is nonfiction, okay? And I always remember it by saying fiction is false. They both start with an F. Nonfiction is not false, okay? An NF. That's how I remember it in my head, if that helps you remember. So nonfiction means it's a true story. Lots and lots of the time, nonfiction stories are an informational text. They're meant to inform. That's the author's purpose. So whenever you are reading nonfiction stories, we've talked a lot about text features this year. That's your big thing to look for, okay? So that might be a title, a date, pictures, maps, table of contents, headings, index, illustrations, charts, captions, graphs, glossaries. All of those are text features that help it make it easier to read nonfiction stories. So like if you think about Life on the Ice, since we read that not too long ago, that is a nonfiction story. So we could tell partially that it was nonfiction because instead of pictures that somebody drew, it was real life photographs, okay? There are lots of different types of nonfiction stories. It can be argumentative, biographies, informational, a personal narrative, or sometimes even persuasive articles can be nonfiction. So for example, if you would like to convince people around you to stop littering, you could write a nonfiction story giving lots of facts about how bad littering is for the earth to try and persuade people to stop doing that, okay? So whenever you're reading fiction or nonfiction, you always want to look for these things that we discussed to help you understand the text better. All right, I hope that helped.